This is Vaudeville News Media. I am your host, Ken Starr.
This is Ken Starr with Vaudeville News Media. This is our 2-minute news special report. AronRa has challenged Jesus to a 3-way combat. First one is physical proof. Second one is ethics and morals. And the third is scientific accuracy of the Bible. Don't fear or stand manly would be reporting blow by blow of every event.
The worst anyone else can do is to question the value of your word, implying that you are not honest. And since that is a very serious charge, it shouldn't be done lightly. You should be able to prove that someone is wrong, but that's not enough. It's easy to be wrong. All of us are wrong at some time. Simply being mistaken is not the same thing as lying. You also have to show that that person knew that they were wrong and that they misrepresented the facts with deliberate intent to deceive. And if you accuse someone of lying and it turns out they're not, that's kind of like when you call checkmate in a professional tournament game and it's not checkmate. Or when you sink the 8 ball in a different hole than the one you called, you lose. Because false accusations will cost you your own credibility. Now, accuracy matters, and so does accountability. And the way I see it, a fundamentally honest person would not want to misinform others even accidentally, and they're eager to apologize when they see that they've wronged someone, even if it's not really or entirely their fault. Because they don't lie comfortably. It's like a pacifist using violence, in terms of self-defense. It's something you won't do if you don't have to. And if you love truth, you'll hate liars, and you'll likely treat liars with contempt. Cowardice, laziness, stupidity, and all these other things you may accept or tolerate in others, but not deceit. Dishonesty is dishonorable. And at the same time, people who are consistently honest also seem to be more altruistic and compassionate. And I have known people on the other side of the scale who will readily lie about any trivial thing without compunction and regardless of consequence. And I don't know how they rationalize this to justify it. They're also quick to accuse all manner of malice in someone else, but are unable to see any fault in themselves. Instead, they engage in blame shifting, projecting their own faults onto others, and anything they do wrong is somehow your fault. And they'll even blame you in the course of an apology. Because such people tend also to be indignant, self-righteous, and show less compassion for others. And these are behavioral traits that I've noticed in debating with creationists. These are the kinds of tactics that they use. Accountability does not exist, and truth, it would seem, is irrelevant.
On my blog, I talked about some of the reasons that others have decided that Jesus never existed, and I hinted at some of my own. I say hinted because it seems I was too subtle. I'm often asked to explain things more deeply because I often give evidence that I think paints the picture obviously enough that I can safely assume that my listener will see the image indicated. However, that rarely happens for reasons that are usually my fault, so I'll go into it a bit more. I said there are 2 possibilities regarding Jesus. He was either an ignorant first-century charlatan and cult leader, heavily exaggerated like Robin Hood, or he's a completely imaginary legendary character like Hercules. Everyone seems to be okay with the first option, except the Christians, of course, and a lot of people have problems with the second one. But think about this. There's really not that much difference between them, is there? Already we've established that by either option, there can't have been a real Jesus.
That would be like me saying that either you are a moron who doesn't have an ounce of intellectual honesty in your whole entire body, or that you're just some charlatan who's preaching to the masses of atheism because you hate religion so much. But let's see.
One of my oldest friends still calls himself a Christian, even though he doesn't believe a word of the Bible. He told me he's Christian because he likes to believe that, not because he thinks it's true. I don't think he realizes what that admission means to me.
one of your oldest friends. Okay, so you're basing your whole premise on what your friend said, and you're using that as an example for all Christians. No, I don't think so. That is dishonest, and then plus, I don't really believe that you have a Christian friend. I think you use them as a means of way to ridicule their beliefs. And weren't you raised as a Mormon? Because their view of Christianity is really, really warped.
He says that Jesus was just some schmuck who had a lot of legends lumped onto him. And when I suggested that there might not have been any one actual Jesus at all, he got angry. He said he wanted there to be some schmuck, by which he meant he wanted there to be some truth at the root of the tale.
One of your oldest friends. Okay, so you're going against the leading experts in anthropology, geology, leading history experts, saying that there was a Jesus, because there's no way that a Christian faith could have sprung up so fast if there wasn't really a person, minus all the other evidence of people actually witnessing him, and then the ossuary of James the Just that was been proven in a court of law, a Jewish court of law, and the inscription on it says James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, along with the other 6 ossuaries that have inscriptions on it proving that the Aramaic text of the Christianity text that has never been plagiarized by Roman or Greek versions is actually correct. Interesting.
We all do. For whatever reason, I used to look at all the old myths, wondering what really happened. But it's not as simple as that. Sometimes none of it is true at all, and sometimes it's a blend of distortions and exaggerations compiled from multiple original events that aren't related. And then what have you got? If there were 3 to 5 actual people at the root of the story, and none of them would even recognize themselves within that story, then what? Looking at the contested option first, let's imagine that we've constructed a time-scanning app that allows us to watch history unfold on our screens and pan around or explore where we want to. Now let's go look for King Arthur. How could the Arthurian legends have emerged unless there was a King Arthur at the root of it, right? Except that what you get there is a collection of fanciful legends of impossible nonsense, and when you strip all that out, you don't have any indication of one particular guy. Historians can't point him out either in time or in space. And some of the multiple potential Arthurs aren't even in England. And I don't think any of them were named Arthur. If there was one, he wasn't an actual king. So if there ever was an Arthur who was something else living somewhere else, would that mean there was an Excalibur, a Lancelot, a Camelot? Or did each of those other elements come from somewhere else and someone else? What happened with King Arthur is...
History of King Arthur. Ardos, the Celtic king. Never heard of him. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. He was born around 436 BC, before the Romans' conquest, but that's all right. If you ever read the history, King Arthur, authenticating the Celtic hero of post-Roman Britain, it's a good read.
What I think happened to Jesus. If you found a guy named Jesus who had a brother named James who also met Paul, assuming that Paul is talking about a real person, then maybe that guy was either Jesus of Damnius, someone who we think is different than the guy we're looking for, or that guy was not even aware of the mountain of nonsense that has been heaped upon his name. He wouldn't even recognize himself as the Jesus we're looking for, because some of those stories had nothing to do with him. Maybe what happened with Jesus is more like what happened with Brian. The problem that a lot of people have with this is that they think that we only need to match a few details from a handful of different versions of what is essentially one story, and that everyone has always agreed on what that story is, but I don't think that at all. Not even part of it. We can't expect that any collection of details in the Gospels are true and that they're the actual story at all, or that they all originated only from the things that one guy actually did or said. Look how the rumor mill turned Darwin into a racist and Hitler into an evolutionist. That happened almost immediately. The Gospels were written decades later with an obvious agenda intent on depicting Jesus as the new David, the new Moses, a king, a Messiah, or a God. And my suspicion is if you found someone whom you think might be the Jesus you're looking for, then other time travelers or archaeologists or historians would likely say that it was someone else, or that parts of this legend pertain to someone else. And if you let that guy see any version of Christianity, even a century later, he wouldn't recognize it, and wouldn't even think the story was about him. Now let's choose an easier one. Let's look for Noah. That name doesn't show up until the priestly writers exiled in Babylon around 500 BCE. And prior to that, the Noah character was known as Ziusudra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and possibly Ubartutu, all of whom have slightly different backgrounds attached since they all hail from different Mesopotamian regions. However, we know that the story is a gross exaggeration of a localized inundation of the Iraqi floodplain centered on the city of Shirapak around 2900 BCE.
The story of Noah. You say you believe in the evolution of language, and you dismiss that the evolution of all beliefs do not stem from one, and there's 2,000 plus variations throughout the world of the tales of Noah, that all beliefs stem from a shaman belief system, even that of the Christian faith. Now, how's that say my belief is true and others are not? Well, I'll say this. The direct correlation of the Bible states that from Adam and Eve to Joseph was the favored line. That's how I interpret that this is correct. Now, just because one culture wrote it down, where did that culture get the story from? You don't know. They made it up. Well, they're the first to make it up because they're the first to write it down, although there's other cultures around that area that has the same stories, but what? You show nothing. That's a fallacy of ignorance. Well, allow me to give you my version. In 13,000 BC, roughly around there, a great flood happened, as you would see from the salt flats and other places where mountain ranges can keep the water from flooding the coastlines. Well, the same thing can keep the water from exiting. There was a flood. The ocean level rose about 33 meters, which is, roughly 100 feet in less than 1 year. Plus, there was other accounts that it rose for another 500 feet plus over the next 100 years. Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine this, ain't that? I mean, and then we look at Globi Tepe, the first temple, many animals that are not indigenous to that area, carvings of 3 men without their heads, 3 sons of Noah. And God gave Noah 7 laws. One of them was to create a court system, which is throughout all the cultures. There's some kind of form of justice system. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, where they supposedly think that Noah's Ark landed, you'd say, well, that's not proof. It's just a bunch of dirt that was pushed up, even though it looks like a boat. Sonar of the readings of the area doesn't mean nothing either. This is all just hearsay. Yeah, right.
So many of the details between these different accounts are consistent that we know they're all talking about the same event, and that event has been confirmed by archaeologists and geologists. So we found Noah, right? Except that he's a handful of different people, none of whom match the 600-year-old codger in the Bible. These stories match each other more closely than they do the biblical version because they were all written 1,000 years earlier, closer to the actual event. Importantly, the additional stories like where Noah curses his own kids afterwards and sends them off to populate different parts of the world, that did not come from these earlier legends. That came from somewhere else, meaning that it pertains to someone else, and some of these other characters or events may be completely imaginary.
Noah never cursed his kids. He cursed the son of Ham, grandson, Canaan. But that's a little logical fallacy on your part again. Get it straight, please.
No one goes looking for the truth at the heart of the tales of Prometheus, Dionysus, or Hercules because we're all pretty sure that that's just people making up stories based on nothing but imagination. And that could be true of Jesus too, and that is what others have suggested. But that's not exactly what I'm suggesting. I think Jesus was more in line with Noah in that you've got all these fanciful exaggerations, but that they're not all one guy, and they're not all real either. And I'm not just talking about the other pre-Christian godmen that Jesus is apparently based on, although that is an important point too. I'm talking about the most that I think we could expect of a historical Jesus. And I don't think that that would either qualify as historical or Jesus. In the very early years of Christianity, you already have factions arguing over whether Jesus was a real person. The Ebionites, or Nazarenes, were a renunciate set who held that Jesus was a purely human prophet, but they did not accept Paul's account of him, which is important here. Then you have the docetics, who say that Jesus was a fully divine being who merely appeared to be human as an illusion. So Jesus is not a physical person and therefore can't really die, unless it happens in the celestial realm, which is what Richard Carrier suggests. Then you have the Gnostics, who are even older than Christianity, and they cast Jesus as an emissary between man and God. However, they did not believe that Jesus died for our sins, and that's a significant difference too. Then you've got the Coptic version, which again is early enough that it could be contemporary with the Gospel of John. Their account includes the Gospel of Thomas, in which Jesus said that if God wanted men to be circumcised, then men wouldn't be born with foreskins. And that rare bit of actual wisdom is part of the Nag Hammadi library, where God himself is oblivious to the fact that he was created by other gods in secrecy, and where Jesus is less important a character than their few different recurrent versions of Adam.
Yes, many variations of Christianity that stemmed from the Roman belief system. Yet, if you look at the Nazarene, oh, wait a minute. You forgot to mention the Nazarenes, the ones that the Jews and the Romans used to call the Christian followers right after and during the time of Jesus. Yeah, you forgot about them. And when later we became known as the Aramaics, No, but that's all right. You don't have to point that out. And you don't have to point out that we do not believe that Jesus is God. We don't believe, we believe that Jesus is the Messiah, not God. We believe that our bodies is the temple of God. And so what you let into your body and mind reflects your health and situation, which probably pretty much supports epigenetics, doesn't it? Surprisingly. And that, that Jesus died because of our sins, because we had a choice to choose when Pilate was up there and Jesus and Barbarus was up there, and the people chose Barbarus because he represented war and Jesus represented peace. It was a test. And we lost again because of dumb shits. But, it just flabbergasts me. Yes, the Romans and Greeks were coming out of their pagan religion of thinking that the giants of the flood thought were gods. They believed in hell. We don't believe in hell. There's no such thing as hell in the Aramaic Christian belief. We're the oldest belief system there is. But yet, you propagate this shit, cranking a little monkey wheel, don't you? Why don't you really get intellectually honest about Christianity? All versions, not just the ones you want to pick and choose. Which is, Jesus was a man of peace. And the message is, you can destroy the man and make him a myth or whatever, but the message that he sent is the same in all of the Christian beliefs. Hell, even Allah took him up into heaven. The Muslims believe that Allah took Jesus into heaven, and he'll come back in the final days to help destroy the Antichrist. Even the Muslims say that he's coming back. So, there we go.
Then there's the infancy gospel, contemporary with the Gospel of Luke, which tells the story of Jesus as a boy. In that, young Jesus is more like Damien from The Omen, because he kills other children with incantations and brings clay figures to life with a golem spell. Remember, this gospel was supposed to have preceded the Gospel of John. And what does that mean about the credibility of the Gospel of John? And look at all the disparity already. We've got 16.
Preacher AronRa. Now, let's talk about the Bible. Aramaic Christians like myself, if you look at the Corborus Codex, it is in the first New Testament writings ever found. Carbon testing dates it 1,600 years old to 1,000 years old. This predates the Roman Bible by 100 years and the Greek by 60 years. And then you bring up my childhood. That never happened. Leading experts of the time say that was fake, like Hippocrates and two others. It was said it was written between 150 AD to 180 AD, the time of Hippocrates, and he called it a fake. So you're going to call a leading expert back then, along with two others, saying it was fake. But this is to be expected. Atheists usually lie about things, like atheists propagated the flat earth, saying Christians believe that the earth was flat. But yet you're a preacher of the cult of atheism. It's funny that if you look around at all the religions, you're an evolutionist, and you believe in the evolution of language, yet you do not believe that all the beliefs stem from one belief. They all evolved from one point of origin. I say it was from Noah. But yet, atheists and Darwinians believe that early man was not possible in the New World. Yet this lady here, a beautiful, intelligent woman, discovered human settlement in Mexico. They buried it. They kept it quiet. She proved beyond all doubt, uranium testing and all the modern technology, that early man was in Mexico 250,000 years ago. That kind of puts a damper on your evolutional theory, as you have to keep pushing the dates back farther and farther and farther. Now, was Jesus a cult leader? Only tell half-truths. You love intellectual honesty, but you're very dishonest about everything you say about religious beliefs. I could go on, but I'm pretty sure I made my point. Oh, hey, this for FYI for you. Schmuck means foolish, stupid, and basically a penis in Yiddish, which means dick. And I never said there's a hell. I never claimed to be God.
Non-canonical gospels emerging in the early days of Christianity, all of which purporting to tell the story of Jesus. Yet they're all different stories, and the early church banned them all as completely heretical. The only Gospels which are canonized are the last one, which shouldn't be for obvious reasons, and the ones largely based on the first one. Even that first one was written decades after Jesus allegedly died, and it's missing important elements of his life, like the virgin birth. That was anonymously added later. The Gospel of Mark is 92% identical to Matthew, except that it corrects some of the errors that shouldn't have been in Matthew. And one that did not get corrected was chapter 1, verse 23. It's a misreading of Isaiah 7:14, as if that was supposed to be a prophecy pertaining to Jesus. Read the rest of that chapter. It can't be. Isaiah was talking about another prophecy that was supposed to be fulfilled some 700 years earlier by some other perfectly ordinary bastard. That prophecy failed spectacularly too, but that's a rant for another time.
Let's see. Exactly 476 years after the commandment was of the temple to be rebuilt, that the Messiah would arrive, and exactly then Jesus rode into Jerusalem. But the Romans knew about this prophecy, so they destroyed the temple. But does that mean what? Exactly 476 days upon Palm Sunday, Jesus rode in to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount, after it was built. So he fulfilled the prophecy, didn't he? Yeah, I think so. Because the prophecy was not about a great warrior. It was about a person bringing peace to the land. And you can find that in Daniel. I can't really think of anything else to tell you that you're going to believe, so.
Still in the first couple of centuries of Christianity, we have Justin Martyr, an early Christian apologist, telling Hellenist Greeks that Jesus is really no different than any other half-human godmen such as Hercules. Now, we atheists understand that Jesus is not significantly different than the pagan gods, but it's nice to see a Christian apologist admit that too. Also remember that there was never an historic origin for Hercules. Justin Martyr accepts as gospel the story of Jesus being strong like a giant to run his course around the world. Where the hell is that story? What was he reading back then?
Hercules. Well, let's talk about the city of Troy. They used to think that the city of Troy was just mythology, made up, never existed until they found it. Then they found it was founded in 3000 BC and that Hercules was there. Was there a man named Hercules with a great massive strength? You said it in yourself in videos that some people have increased muscle mass. Well, there we go. Until we get a time machine, everything's fact or based on fact.
Come on, Jesus, let's your God. I'm gonna rip your little cauliflower sauce. Yeah, if you don't bite me, I'm gonna stomp on your nuts and in your face.
Well, looks like he's real. AronRa's gonna feel that in the morning.
Ken Starr here. Wow, that was a hell of a knockout. Good job, Jesus. Well, Stan Manley, who do you think's going to come up with intellectual honesty on the Bible with using the facts in round 2?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to put my money on Jesus. He was actually there. AronRa, he lies through his teeth a lot. He's got a perpetual notion of telling half truth.
Well, we'll have to find out now, won't we? All right, I hear he's ready. Stay tuned.